Welcome back to the Counterfeit Emotions podcast. I'm Curtis Morley. I'm an emotionologist, and I'm grateful that you're willing to go on this journey with me to find the one emotion that can't be counterfeited, and that's peace. Today, I've got a special guest, a longtime friend, Sam Bracken. And Sam is an author, a leadership coach. He played college football, and the list goes on. And I'm really excited to have Sam on because I was recommended a book called Unwind. And I downloaded it without asking questions. It came from a really good source. Said, you've got to listen to this book. It's fantastic. And I usually listen to Audible when I go on my runs or my bike rides. And as I did, I heard this voice. I'm like, that voice sounds so familiar. It was a very calming, peaceful voice. And as I pulled up my phone to look who was actually the author, it was Sam Bracken, my good friend. And so we reconnected, and I'm excited to have Sam on the show today because we've got some really deep, important things to talk about, specifically trauma and triggers and how to overcome. We're going to talk about pain versus misery. We're going to talk about advocacy versus anger. So, Sam, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's great to be with you, Curtis. Thank you for having me.
It's been a minute. I'm so excited to dive back into our conversation. So we knew each other way back at Franklin Covey.
Yes, we did. We worked closely together.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that time.
Yeah. And the Sam I see sitting in front of me today is a very different Sam than the one that I knew back at Franklin Covey.
Yeah, I was a little uptight back then, a little wound up, maybe.
Which is so fun because as I was listening to Unwind, I was like, this is Sam. Sam wrote this book. This is like it was so fun to see that that your topic was actually unwinding, is get rid of that tension, that stress, that pent up emotions. And so I had to have you on the show.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. You know, it was a great project. Dr. Michael Open at Weber State and I worked on that book, and I learned so much about the stress response and how to live in a mindful state, which really helps you have peace, actually. In that book, we really talk about how to understand what's happening. And when you think about it, the stress response by itself is an embedded. The stress response is embedded in our DNA, right? And it has one purpose only, and that is to save us when we're in danger.
The self-protection.
It's self-protection. And the challenge is, the way Dr. Open and I discussed it in the book was, let's say, we lived a couple thousand years ago. We had our little cave and we were cooking some meat on the fire, and we're sort of in a primitive state, making primal noises. And there's a saber-toothed tiger or a bear off in the distance, and they get a whiff of that food. And all of a sudden, the bear comes into the camp, and everybody, panics. And for years, people used to think the presence of the bear caused the stress response. And what we found out was the presence of the bear. What happened was, as the bear came into the camp, people that were slow and didn't do what they needed to do, they were eaten by the bear. Yeah. And people that were fast ran away, and other people got spears and they tried to kill the bear. So you had this stress response, and in about 90 seconds, your heart rate goes up, your appetite goes down, your adrenaline goes up. All these things turn on and off, and it's meant for pure survival. For years they thought that it was the presence of the bear that caused the stress response. And these days we know it's not the presence of the bear, because can you be in front of a bear without having a stress response?
We were just up at the zoo.
Exactly.
And we had a big fat bear right up against the window.
There's a little pretty bear. There's a little pretty bear, right? And you can, and the difference is the difference between those scenarios is the thought, oh crap, there's a bear. And it's the oh crap thought that creates the stress response. And this is really important because our thinking creates our emotions. Our emotions impact our actions, and our actions drive our outcomes. This is a really important truth. And but it's when we think, oh crap, then it kicks on a stress response, right? And its only purpose is to keep you alive. So when I ask people, how often do they feel like a stress response? They say like 80% of Americans are like stressed out. They live in a state of chronic stress. And when you live in a state of chronic stress, you have this stress response that comes and goes and comes and goes. And you start in homeostasis. Then you have stress, right? You have a stress response, your body reacts. And then you basically return to homeostasis. This is good. This is a good thing, right? But what happens is when that happens over and over and over and over again, you get in a state of chronic stress. And chronic stress kills you. It destroys you psychologically, mentally. So in that book, Unwind, we talk about ways to avoid chronic stress. We talk about the concept of mindfulness. We talk about meditation, exercise, prayer. And we use the 7 habits of highly effective people by, our esteemed Dr. Covey, right?
Dr. Covey.
Yeah. And we use that as a framework to talk about how we can unwind and live with greater peace and harmony in our own lives. So that was a great, fun project. And I really enjoyed working with Michael on it. And it's blessed me for years. And it really helped me live life a lot, it really helped me live life with a lot greater sense of purpose and peace.
And let's dig into that. Let's dig into that because being a friend, I can say this. When I realized Sam Bracken was the author of Unwind, I'm like, whoa, this is a major shift. This is like, I would love to know why did you write the book? Why did that come about? And what gave you the confidence to be able to write Unwind?
Well, the first reason I wrote the book is because I needed it personally. And I sought after some experts that could help me talk about it intelligently. And that was Dr. Michael Open. And working with Dr. Breck England and Dr. Michael Open, we wanted to create a framework that could help everybody live with greater peace and harmony and give them the tactical tools to be able to deal with anxiety and stress and anger when things roll up. We wanted to give them some tactical tools to deal with to help their lives be better. So we worked together for months and then created the outline, and we just wrote the book and published it.
Yeah.
So it's done well. The book's done well.
Yeah, it really seems to have done well. And with that, like the idea of this is something I needed, because when I wrote my first book, The Entrepreneur's Paradox, I wrote it for 26-year-old Curtis,
right,
starting his first company and saying, okay, you don't have to go through so much pain. Let me help you avoid these pitfalls along the way. Like, dig into that. Share with me a little bit more about how you realize, this book is for me as much as it is for anyone else.
Yeah. So, I was raised on the fringes of the mob and motorcycle gang members and was horrifically abused as a child.
And you you wrote another book. This was your first book, right?
Yeah, my Orange Duffel Bag, yeah.
So you wrote a book called The Orange Duffel Bag. This is such a cool book. It's got an actual duffel bag on the as the cover, and then the graphic design inside is mind-blowing. It's so incredible, the design. And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows this is not an easy read.
No, it's heavy. It's really heavy.
Incredibly heavy. You went through things that most people will never go through. You went through some things in your life that I frankly can't even imagine. And And that, the fact that you're here on this show, the fact that you worked at Franklin Covey, the fact that you've written, is it 4 books now?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And where you came from, I would love to dig into that, because this story right here, if someone were to meet you, they would never know this story.
Yeah.
They would never think that Sam Bracken was the kid that was homeless, carrying around an orange duffel bag with everything he had in life, and the abuse, the trauma, the crimes that you witnessed. Like, it's astonishing. So,
well, it's fascinating. You share this with me. It's fascinating, Curtis, that you bring this up, because, the older I get, the more I realize that everyone has trauma. Everyone has pain. Everyone, not one of us, no matter what our circumstances are in life, we all have pain. We all have disappointment. We all get discouraged, but not everyone takes that pain and discouragement and uses it in a way to make their lives better. In the Orange Duffel Bag book, we have this saying called "Be better, not bitter," and those there's 8 billion people in the world, and in this country, many of us, we live at such a higher standard. We our standard of living and the blessings we have in our life are immense, but there's a lot of people in this world that suffer. And I had a hard go of it as a kid, and
yeah, you did,
and it made me who I am, and interestingly enough, early in my youth, one of the things that saved me, I know this is gonna sound weird, but what saved me was anger and rage, and this sport called football, and it worked until it didn't work.
The anger,
right? So in the construct of football, it's a game of violence. I love people who talk about football who really don't know about it. I'm like, no, it's a game of violence.
Who haven't played it
at a very high level. No, it's a game of violence, extreme violence, and it's not if you retire, it's when you retire. And my Orange Duffel Bag book's about how being homeless as a kid at 15, it's my story on how I overcame a lot of obstacles, and it really is a story of a handful of people who reached out, reached up, and reached across and saved me, just one kid. They believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They saw the rough edges and the intensity, and they helped me redirect it in ways that were productive. And it changed the course of my life. At the same time I wrote that book, I started a nonprofit called the Orange Duffel Bag Initiative in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm happy to tell you that, we've been around for 12 years, and we've saved the lives of thousands of young people in Atlanta, mostly kids in foster care. And we've helped them change their lives and become self-reliant. And much of it is based on the good work that the foundation does or the nonprofit does. And because I gave them all the intellectual property and the rights to use my story, and a bunch of volunteers and coaches that really help change the lives of these young people. It makes all the difference. And because I learned principles at Georgia Tech from my college football coach, Bill Curry, and we've turned those into practical learning lessons for young people who have really hard go of it. When you're in foster care, you have a lot of opposition, and there's a lot of things against you. We roughly have 500,000 kids in foster care in this country, and currently, and about 20% age out. They reach the age of 18, and they age out, and no one knows where they go. Well, I know where they go. They go to jail, they die, or they become on the street and become addicts. And I should be dead, insane, or in prison, but I'm not. And it's a great blessing to me to take the lessons I learned in my childhood and throughout my life, and share it with others in ways to help them be more resilient and help them frame up things in ways that can help them be better, not bitter. So it's a heavy book, starts out bad, ends up good, but it's done a lot of good in the world. So I'm happy to share it with people.
The story. Yeah, this is not for the light of heart. And the stories that come with the book, the fire.
Like, oh yeah, set on fire.
Like, are you okay to share that story?
Well, yeah, I was set on fire. As a young child, I was burned really badly. I still have the scars to prove it. But when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my older stepbrother took lighter fluid and doused me with it and lit me on fire. It was a horrific experience. Prior to 8 years old, I don't have a lot of memories, but the memories I have are horrifying. I was left with nuns in an orphanage when I was like 5, was set on fire, abandoned, brutally beaten. I was abused every way you could be abused. So I was abused physically, spiritually, emotionally, sexually. I was molested. And these things, they create trauma. And trauma, there's a book that I really love by Gabor Mate called The Myth of Normal. Man, it's a beautiful book about trauma. It talks about the origin of trauma. And trauma, when you look at the things that happened to me in my life, they're bad, right? But trauma is no respecter of persons, right? And trauma is not what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you. So it's very deceiving because you look at the actual things that happened to me and they were so terrible, so diabolical.
That's a great word for it.
They were terrible.
Diabolical.
But the way I responded to them really is where the damage was done. Now, why this is important to understand is because trauma creates triggers. So what happens in your mind and in your neurology, in your brain and in your neurology, is that you have this great self-preservation kind of mechanism. Mm-hmm. And when you have a traumatic experience, your brain hijacks your body to save you, right? So trauma creates triggers. Triggers take away free will. And if you don't get to the root of these things, it really, and Gabor Mate would say, it leads to alcoholism, drug addiction, pornography addiction. Like the root of addiction, according to Dr. Mate, is trauma, not genetics. And he has the data that backs it up. It's brilliant. And it makes so much sense because I'm like, both my parents were alcoholics and drug users. And I'm like, genetically, they didn't pass down the tendencies to be alcoholics or drug users. I guess if you're born with fetal alcohol syndrome, it's a different story. But for the most part, it's because of their drug and alcohol use and the abuse that you had in that environment that causes you to have trauma, right? And the Gabor says, when you have this trauma, you try to comfort the trauma. You try to soothe it, right? And you go to drugs, you go to alcohol, you go to porn, you go to these other modalities to try to soothe the trauma, and you never get it soothed.
Yeah.
Because until you deal with the root of the trauma, you never fix yourself.
Yeah.
So, and what happens is you do this over time, you become an alcoholic, you become an addict to porn, or other drugs, and then all of a sudden your body's completely hijacked, not just by the trauma, but by the drug addiction. So there's a painful way to go through all of this. And I've done that. I've done the work.
Yes, you have.
I've done the work in trauma therapy, and the way it actually, I know I'm talking too much, but the way it actually materialized about 10 years ago, my wife is watching my 3-year-old cousin, and she's doing a favor for a family friend and watching this little boy. His name is Leo. I love Leo. And I was happy that Kim watches Leo, and Leo's over the house for one weekend. Kim's like taking care of every need that Leo ever had, right? And as I watch her taking care of Leo, I had a complete panic attack and meltdown. It made no sense, like literally no sense whatsoever. I started shaking. I lost control of myself. And I went to my therapist and I said, what is going on? And he said, "What happened to you when you were 3?"
Hmm.
I said, "I don't even want to speak. I don't even remember." He goes, "It was bad, dude. I can tell you that right now."
Yeah.
And then he worked through a series of modalities that helped me reintegrate my neurology so that I could lessen my triggered responses, right? And this is hard work. It's hard work. It's not easy. It opens Pandora's box, and you can't stop halfway through.
Yeah.
You have to go all the way and get all of it dealt with. And I've had the good fortune to be able to do that. And it's left me living with greater peace and harmony, but it was a painful process. It wasn't cheap either.
Yeah.
So it cost some money.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple things I'd love to hit on that you talked about is that our decisions come from our emotions. Our
Right.
emotions come from our thoughts or our
Right.
beliefs. Our emotion or our thoughts and our beliefs come from events that happen in our lives.
Right.
And the reason this is so important to understand is that if we can understand that that the emotional state where we make those decisions based on emotions, that's our starting point to healing. Is that we can say, okay, if I have this emotion, I know that came from a thought, which came from a belief, which came from an event, and we can go back to that event and we can rewrite the meaning
Yeah.
of that event.
You can reframe it.
We don't rewrite the event because the event happened.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Right.
But we can rewrite the meaning.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite definitions of trauma is that trauma is an event that your brain couldn't process.
Oh yeah, it's totally true.
And I love that definition, even though it's so simple. That's such a simple definition, but I love it because it takes the fear out of trauma. All it does is it says, okay, here's an event, and I couldn't process it when it happened. When it happened, it was so foreign to my mind that I couldn't process it. But today I can. Today I can process that horrific, or in your case, those despicable events that happened in a way that brings me peace.
Right. Right.
And I don't have to push the demons down in my soul anymore. I don't have to say, you know what, I'm not going to let you out.
Right. Right.
Instead, I'm going to actually bring you out. It's what I call taking my demons to lunch.
Yeah.
is pull out those demons, take them to lunch, see them for what they are, how they're trying to help us. Just like you said, it's a protection mechanism. It's a protection mechanism that says this happened and I'm going to try and protect you. And therefore, I'm going to go to this behavior. I'm going to soothe that emotion. I'm going to soothe that thought or belief. And it's so important. And one of the dyads of counterfeit emotions is eustress versus distress.
Right. Right.
And
Eustress is good.
Eustress is fantastic.
Eustress is the stress response, right?
Yeah.
It's something that keeps you alive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Chronic stress, distress is not good.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about that a little earlier, but it's a bad deal, right?
Yeah. And are you gonna change the window, Tommy?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay.
We got a little halo on your head.
Oh, do I? I'm angelic.
It's quite nice. There we go.
This is a new problem. I'm so sorry.
No worries, man.
Yeah. So eustress, they used to think that stress caused heart disease, that it caused all of these things. And it was exactly what you said. It wasn't the stress. It was how we viewed the stress.
Right.
Is the stress a negative or is the stress a positive? And when we can change it from negative to positive, all of a sudden we found that the research shows it's actually beneficial to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
If we say positive stress helps me, takes me where I want to go, and reframe our mindset to, you know what, this isn't distress. This is eustress. This is an amazing help in my life where we flip the trigger from bad to good.
You know, it's amazing you use the term reframe. I love that term. It's a real big, it's a powerful principle in resilience, is this idea of reframing. One can look back on my childhood and say, it was so so terrible. It was, and I could be full of piss and vinegar and anger and all this stuff because of it. And trust me, I had a phase in my life where I was full of that.
Mhm.
And, but it's not productive, right?
Yeah, it doesn't serve us.
But it doesn't, it actually imprisons us. It does the opposite. It makes you a prisoner to your trigger,
Mhm.
right? But when you can go back and reframe it, and sometimes to reframe this kind of situation, you need clinical help. So sometimes we can't do it alone. This is a really important point, Curtis, is that sometimes the trauma is so bad, you need help, and you cannot deal with it on your own. You need professional help. And you need the right credentialed professional help. Let me say that even more, because you can get clinical help, but you need someone that's informed, that has certificates of how to deal with trauma, because then because if you don't have people that know what they're doing, it can destroy you psychologically. So you got to be very careful here. But the point is if you can reframe these events to be a strength to you, it changes everything. So I had a hard go of it. You know what though? I have empathy from that. You know what I did? I started a nonprofit. This changed the lives of thousands of young people whose future looks bad. I could never have done that if I didn't have those experiences. That blessing and benefit isn't a part of my life if I wasn't able to reframe all that. So this is it's not an easy thing to do, to reframe. Sometimes you can do it on your own. Sometimes you need help, but it's worth it because we're here to suffer. We're here to learn from that suffering. And there's a lot of, and you see this a lot out there these days. You have a judger mindset. I learned this at Columbia when I did an executive coaching practicum with Michael Simpson years ago while at Franklin Covey. Is you typically have two types of people. You have judger mindset people and you have growth mindset people. And at Columbia, they teach you that one's not good, one's not bad. They just teach you to, you're talking with people, two different mindsets, and your job is to help them both. But I've grown really fond of the growth mindset. Judger mindset doesn't do much for you, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But a growth mindset, because everybody has setbacks, everybody has trial, everybody has challenges. It's what you learn from that and how you adjust from that defines your life. Right?
Yeah.
It can give you purpose and meaning. This is what Viktor Frankl talks about in Man's Search for Meaning and other books. But trauma is a very serious thing. And it's not, there's not a lot of, there's not a manual.
Yeah.
Not a manual to help make things better.
Yeah. And you would think there would be after so many years.
There's a lot of books out there, some good ones, but
yeah. And when I look at your life and when I read through the Orange Duffel Bag, like to see where you are today and to see that the evolution continues. Like you could have chosen a victim mindset so easily. And I'm sure you saw so many people surrounding you in your early life that did that chose the victim mindset. But you stepped up.
Yeah, you have to use free will.
You said, I don't have to be defined by what has happened to me in life. I don't have to choose what is been given me. I can choose what I decide.
Yeah.
And to go from that victim to a victor.
And
in my life, this was one of the biggest changes for me, was to eliminate the phrase, why is this happening to me? And change that to, why is this happening for me?
Yeah.
When that question changed in my life, I truly saw that I didn't have to be a victim to anything, but I could be a victor and I could rise above. And then, like with the foundation, with the Orange Duffel Bag Initiative, you took it one more step and you said, how can this happen through me? Because you know the pain
Yeah.
of those foster kids being bounced from house to house, having no stability, getting kicked out, living on the street. You know that pain on a level that other people don't know. And you were able to say, you know what, not only am I not going to be a victim and be a victor, but I'm going to be a vessel. And I'm going to take the pain that has, like you said, been a blessing in my life.
It's a gift, actually. As crazy as it sounds, it's a gift.
And take that and change other people's lives for the good and help them step out of the victim mindset.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's really interesting because at the crux of this, you bring up a really good point. And that is where does our free will, the good, you bring up a really good point, and that is where does your free will start and end, right? This
We'll
idea
go deeper on that.
Yeah, about freedom, right? Freedom. I've tried to teach my children when they were younger, and even today as they're older, they say, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I just say, you can't, I won't let you use those words. You don't have to do a damn thing. You are free. Don't ever let your mind think you have no choice, ever. This is the old Sam coming back that you're used to, because you're free. You don't have to do anything. Now, everything has a consequence, but you are free. The moment you think you have to do something, you'll make the wrong decision because your brain will not function properly, because you are free to choose. And when bad things happen to you, you are free to say, I can learn from this. I can get better from this. I'm going to make this turn into a gift and be far better off because of it. You're free to do that. Or you're free to say, oh, woe is me, saddy face. And I'm just going to just slump and live in debauchery and self-sabotage and all these other things. Well, you're free to do that too. But the battle we fight is a battle of our thinking. The battle we fight is the battle of our thinking. And sometimes emotions rise up, and we don't take the time to understand where that emotion, what thought triggered that emotion.
Yeah.
Because that always works that way. If you have a bad emotion, it comes from a bad thought. And if you have and what happens is most people don't know how to, because we all have bad emotions. We all have negative emotions. Dr. Daniel Amen, who wrote the foreword of Unwind, he calls them automatic negative thoughts, or ants.
Ants, yes.
Right? And they come up.
Yeah.
But and we may not have control over a negative thought coming up, but once it gets there, you have control of what you do with it, right? You the battle we fight is the battle of cognition, controlling your frontal lobe. Your free will is found right here in your frontal lobe, right here. And when people have damaged brains in their frontal lobe, they lose cognition. And cognition is the thing that makes us better than anything else in this world. We can think about our thoughts. We have the biggest brains. And that cognition is a wonderful gift. And cognition allows us to reframe circumstances, exercise free will, do these kinds of things to take control over our life and to turn bad things into good things. History is full of people who have risen above terrible things and done good things.
Yeah.
Right. And we honor them and pay homage to them, right? Because they were able to change the trajectory of whole countries and civilizations.
Change their stars.
Change their stars, right? Create their own destiny. So I know I'm sort of rambling here. I'll stop, but it's really found in your thinking.
Yeah. And it is, because just like the studies have now shown, that if we view stress as quote unquote bad, then it does create heart damage. If we view it as positive, and where we change the thinking from, oh, pain is bad. And that's one thing that I had to come to terms with is that emotionally, I don't believe that there is a good or bad emotion. I think that all emotions bring a message. And there's some emotions that serve us. I call those the positive emotions. And then there's the negative emotions. But but labeling one as good and one as bad, it actually perpetuates the problem. It actually perpetuates the fact that, okay, I'm having bad emotions, therefore I must be bad. And that idea of worthiness and worth is eroded. Whereas if we accept every emotion, every one of them, and say, you know what? I'm just going to see you. I'm just going to see what's happening.
Observe the emotion.
Yeah. I call it witnessing the emotion.
Yeah, right on.
If we just witness the emotion and say, hello, fear, I know you. Oh, yeah. We've spent some time together, and just let it flow through. Then we can recognize it. We can say, okay, I know you. I can put a name to you. Whereas a lot of times we think instead of emotions being messengers, they're dictators. And those dictators say, you have to do this. Kind of like what you're talking about with your kids. You have to do this. You have to do that. Well, no. I am not my thoughts. I am not my emotions. I can witness my thoughts and I can witness my emotions. And then I get to choose.
You do.
I get to choose what to do with that. If I'm going to go into victim, if I'm going to be a victor, or if I'm going to step up and become a vessel, that's mine. I don't have to just be controlled by my emotions.
Right.
I can step out and say, hey, shame, hey, fear, hey, whatever you are, even the positive ones. Mm-hmm. We don't have to be controlled by the positive ones. And that was one that just kind of broke my brain when I realized that triggers are not just negative.
No, you can have positive triggers.
Triggers are also positive.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be controlled by those either.
Mm-hmm.
We can just simply sit back and witness and say, oh, I see you. I see you.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing this message. Because one thing in my research that I found is that every counterfeit emotion actually points over to the authentic. So for example, in let's take guilt and shame. When I'm feeling shame, it's actually saying, hey, why don't you go to the positive emotion of guilt? They feel similar. They look and act and feel like each other. But the one says, I did something wrong and I can repair. And that's the purpose of guilt. Guilt says, make amends, do that so you can have compassion and you can connect with the other person. Shame says, instead of I made a mistake, I am a mistake.
Yeah, you're a bad person.
My character is a mistake.
It's a bad deal.
I stink because just being on earth is a mistake for me.
Right.
But every single one of the counterfeits actually point to the authentic. And when we can honor that message without being controlled by the dictator of that emotion, then we can actually make the change. Another one that we've kind of hinted around is advocacy versus anger. And anger points to advocacy. Anger says there's something wrong that needs to be addressed. There's a boundary being crossed. There's an injustice. And there's only two reasons anyone will ever get angry. Ever. There's only two. The first is danger. It's the bear. And when the bear is coming at you, it's really important to grab the stick and poke it in the eye. It's super important to do that. And how often do we have bears? Emotionally, we think we have bears.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
We're not in danger much.
We're
we
really
think
not.
We're in danger all the time.
Yeah. And the second reason is injustice. So we'll only ever get angry because of danger or injustice. That's it. And when I say injustice, I mean a perceived injustice, because sometimes they're not actual injustices.
Right.
Sometimes our brain just says, he cut me off in traffic. That's a major injustice. And I need to get, rage machine. And, I think of Dude Perfect and the rage monster. And the truth is we don't have to do that. We can just recognize there was a danger right there. And we can say, am I okay? Yeah. At this moment, I am. And advocacy says, instead of, suppress that emotion or get really aggressive. So it's kind of this pendulum. On one side is suppression. Like, I'm not supposed to get mad. I shouldn't get mad. And the other side is aggression. Like, okay, let's go. Put on the gloves. We're doing this. And that pendulum swings back and forth between suppression and aggression. But when the mood swings stop, right in the center, that's where we find expression. And I love advocacy because it is the healthy version of anger. But yet anger points to it. Anger says there's an injustice. Figure this out. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't, firebomb somebody's car. Just express. And the root of the word advocate is advocare, which means to invite in. Advocate says, let's invite in. Whereas anger says, no, let's push out. Let's destroy. Anger is always destructive, where advocacy is always constructive. It says there's something wrong here, and I'm going to invite you in to figure it out together.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say this, I read this book recently by Mel Robbins called The Let Them Theory.
Yes.
And she defines emotion as a chemical burst of like a drug burst in your brain. It lasts about 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Most emotions come and go.
Yeah.
And I really like that definition, because if you have emotion, and you understand it, you can separate yourself from the emotion, right? Then you can say, okay, what are the feelings? You can separate feelings and facts.
Yes.
Right. And when I'm coaching people, one of my jobs is to really understand them, because you have high emotion and you meet with high understanding. What happens is emotions reduce. And when emotions reduce, you can separate feelings and facts. And then you can make a decision based on good thinking, accurate thinking. Because a lot of times, if you make decisions just on pure emotion, it can betray you, right? But then, so what I hear you talking about, I teach people very similar principles, and that is separate the feelings from the facts. Understand the emotions are going to come and go. What thought is brewing up here that's making that emotion worse, and then sit in the emotion.
Yeah,
sit with it and just say, okay, I'm mad right now, because that shouldn't have happened. And what I love about your explanation about advocacy, which is what we give our Orange Duffel Bag kids, by the way, that's the main thing we give them, is advocacy. We help them along the way. We're their advocate.
Yeah.
To help them become self-reliant. The way you turn something bad that happened to you into something good is through advocacy, right? That's how you do it. It's the anti-venom from the snake bite.
Yeah.
Right. It's a beautiful description. I really like how you're framing that, because it's accurate. It works. So thank you for that gem.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's the thing is in English language, you cannot use the word advocate and against together. It doesn't work. It's not grammatically correct.
Right.
You can only say advocate for. You can say fight against and use that anger, that rage, that wrath. You can say fight against all day long, but you can't say advocate against. You can only say advocate for. And I don't know if you felt it, but I just felt it as I was saying that, the change of heart that happens.
Switches.
Instead of you're the enemy, it's now let's come together and let's open our hearts to figure out a solution for this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it becomes connecting. That's the first criteria for counterfeit emotions is there's four criteria to know if you're feeling an authentic emotion or a counterfeit. And the first one is, does it connect? Does this emotion connect me? Does it connect me first to myself? Does it connect me to others, like this conversation? Does it connect me to God? And does it connect me to truth? And advocacy connects.
It does.
Advocacy brings people together in that welcoming sense that I am going to advocate for you and I'm going to advocate for me.
Right.
Instead of I'm going to fight against. And there's so many movements in the world, like let's fight against this group or fight against that group. And that doesn't work. It creates what I call the anger danger cycle. and what I mean by that is that I see danger or perceive danger or an injustice that I think is danger. And what happens? Then I can get mad and I turn into somebody that's angry. Well, what happens when I get angry is that creates danger for someone else. And then they get angry and it creates danger for me. And then we go in this circle, the danger cycle. And all of a sudden now everything is escalated and there's wars fought.
Yeah, there's no love, that's for certain.
Yeah. Instead of saying, I want to see you. I want to understand you.
Mhm.
And the fact that you're different than me, the fact that you were raised different, you had a different understanding in the world, that's not a bad thing.
It's a good thing.
That's a way for both of us to grow.
Yeah, so through that, yeah.
Both of us to raise and get higher.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah. And you've had an amazing journey through life. It's been harder than most.
Mhm.
And harder than I truly, like, I read The Orange Duffel Bag and your other writings, and I'm like, I don't know how you're here today. I don't even know how you're alive. And yet you are. And you're doing good, and you're making the change, and you're digging deep in your own trauma. The one emotion that can't be counterfeited is peace. As you think about peace in your life, where do you find peace?
That's a great question. I find peace in my family. I find peace in helping people unlock their potential, becoming their best self, regardless of their experience or regardless of their environment. I find peace in living with purpose and passion. I find peace spending time with God and in prayer and meditation. I find peace by living on point and it with purpose. So I feel peace right now. So I'm really proud of your all the great things that you're doing, and I'm just really impressed by the discipline that's taken to create a framework around negative emotions and counterfeit emotions, and how to use emotions for our benefit and not for our emotions are, I guess I would say, emotions are to be understood, not blamed for bad action, right? And that can be a powerful tool to help people live with peace if you understand them properly. So thanks for all your work, for all you're doing.
Sam, I love you, brother.
Love you too, man.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And sharing yourself to be able to help others.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, brother. Have a good one.
Thank you all for joining us on this week's episode and going on the journey of understanding the counterfeit and the authentic emotions. Until next week, I hope you live your most authentic life.